It's a cold winter's night in 2001. A winter storm had its icy grip on New York City, and the police are rushing towards a skyscraper where a man stood at the top. This man is a dangerous person whom you should never cross because he is a man with nothing to lose. That man is Max Payne, portrayed by writer and creative director of Remedy Entertainment Sam Lake, and he is the focus of today's game, or well, the Game Boy Advance version of it. Max Payne for the Game Boy Advance was developed by Mobius Entertainment Limited, who would later become Rockstar Leeds in 2004. Being on a significantly less powerful platform, this version of Max Payne isn't a 3D third-person shooter like its console and later mobile version. Instead, the Game Boy Advance opted to use sprites in an isometric perspective with polygonal characters. The game is also notable for being one of only 9 M-rated games in the US for the Game Boy Advance, as well as being released after its sequel, Max Payne 2: The Fall of Max Payne, on consoles and PC. The plot of the game follows its console and PC version, which has you playing as former NYPD detective turned DEA undercover agent Max Payne. 3 years earlier, in 1998, while he was still a detective, Max was living the ideal life. He had a nice house, a loving wife, and a newly born baby daughter. He'd also smoked his last cigarette, as it would be bad for the baby, after politely declining an offer from his old partner and friend Alex Boulder to join the DEA in order to spend time with his family. As Max had put it was the American dream come true. However, that would all come crashing down one evening when Max would arrive home to find that his house was a mess and his wife and baby dead, killed by drug addicts high on a drug called Valkyr, or V for short. After the funeral, Max decides to transfer to the DEA and once again work with Alex to try and find out who was supplying Valkyr in the city. It takes them 3 years before they break the case and discover that it's being trafficked by the Punchinello crime family. Max goes undercover, and 2 months later he's informed by another DEA agent named BB that something has come up and he needs to meet with Alex at Roscoe Street Station. Max has a bad feeling about this, and so he makes his way to the station, unaware that this would be the beginning of several nights filled with bodies and destruction, as Max wages his revenge against the mob and the people responsible for supplying the drug that led to his family being killed. But is this game any good? Find out in The Good. The game is an amazing and mostly faithful adaptation of the console and PC version, considering what they had to work with in terms of the Game Boy Advance's power. While there are some cut sequences and levels, such as Max encountering the addicts at his home at the start of the game, the attack on the cargo ship, or meeting a character responsible for something that had happened earlier in the game for example, the game has done an excellent job retaining most of its content. Better yet, they had even kept the graphic novel cutscenes in, as well as most of the noir-style narration Max gives by the late James McCaffrey.
We come to you now live from the crime scene.
Who is this?
Right back at you.
This is Deputy Chief Jim Bravura from the NYPD. You are to cease your criminal activities and surrender immediately.
Sure thing, Jim. Me and the boys have been talking and everyone's real sorry. They'll never do it again.
Who the hell is this?
Being placed at the scene of a bank robbery wouldn't have tipped the odds in my favor.
While audio quality isn't exactly at the same level as other versions, you can still clearly make out what Max is saying as he narrates the story. Some of the internal monologues Max would normally make during cutscenes in the console and PC versions were mostly added into the graphic novel sections of the Game Boy Advance version. The game's music is also unique and differs from the console and PC version while still capturing the noir atmosphere, and while there are only a few tracks, I never got sick of listening to them as I was taking out bad guys left, right and centre. I think the developers have done an incredibly impressive job of faithfully converting the story and cutscenes across, and although not everything was able to make it across, the key parts of the story detailing who was trafficking the drug, where they got it from and the reason why Max and his family were targeted are still explained in detail. The game also references a lot of elements to Norse mythology, and a lot of the characters, whether it be by name, appearance or actions, parallel various figures, factions and events from it. The fact that they were able to keep all of this stuff in certainly exceeded what I was expecting from a Game Boy Advance adaptation. The gameplay was something else I was quite impressed with. As I mentioned earlier, the game is an isometric shooter with sprites for background objects and polygonal characters, which has worked incredibly well. I was surprised by the detail and the destructible environment in the game's levels, and some levels stay quite faithful to the console and PC version, with Roscoe Street Station mostly staying the same. As Max runs around, he can take advantage of 2 key mechanics present in the series. Max has access to bullet time, which will slow everything around him briefly, allowing him to often get the first shot in and kill multiple enemies, and this can be used in conjunction with his signature shoot dodge maneuver, where Max will dive in the air during bullet time to avoid enemy fire while still shooting, and you will be using a lot of this throughout the game. The bullet time gauge is next to Max's health bar, and will refill as Max kills enemies, whether it be in bullet time or not. Max will also have several weapons at his disposal, ranging from his signature Beretta to a Desert Eagle, shotguns, machine gun, assault rifle, Molotovs, grenades, and even a grenade launcher. In the case of the Beretta and the Ingram submachine gun, Max can dual wield these guns in pairs, with the latter being very useful for clearing rooms of enemies. Max will also pick up painkillers which will restore his health. There are moments where painkillers are scarce, and others where you'll have too many of them, which I think balances the game well. After completing the game, a couple of extras are unlocked, such as Dead on Arrival, which is the equivalent of the game's hard mode where enemies have more health, as well as cheats for the game in order to give Max unlimited ammo, all weapons, and Super Cop mode, which is the equivalent of God mode. Dead on Arrival requires a lot more planning, and strategies that you would have normally employed in your first playthrough are less likely to work given the extra health the enemies have. The game also has an optional gore option, which I would leave on, as this can help you figure out if you're hitting an enemy that's off screen, as most enemies will often hurt Max before you figure out where they are. The other extra mode is New York Minute, which has Max trying to beat the level within a set amount of time. The only way Max can increase his time limit is by killing enemies. These mode add a replayability factor to the game, and I enjoyed the time I spent dabbling with it. However, the game's not perfect, so let's look at what didn't work so well in the bad. While the game is an isometric shooter, the only issue I had with it is the visual depth of some areas. Late into the game, there will be areas where Max will have to avoid actual fire, which will tear through his health and likely kill him if he touches it. Some areas have him navigate past several pipes shooting out fire at regular intervals, and one of the areas frustrated me as I could cross past one pipe, but I wouldn't be far enough forward to be safe from the flames coming out from the pipe I'd just passed and will instantly die. Max only has a limited amount of lives per level, and when he dies he starts back in the room he died in. Once you've run out of lives, you can still continue, but it'll be from the start of that level instead. In the level immediately after the one I'm talking about, there are flaming pipes again, but instead the pipes are up where the ceiling is, and the fire is being shot downwards, so you would need to make sure you aren't accidentally standing in a spot where Max would be touched by flames and die. And this can get quite tricky, knowing that you cannot change the perspective of the camera to help you. This issue also applies to a couple of gaps where Max will need to jump across in the game, as a mistimed or misplaced jump may lead Max to his death instead of the safety of the other side. The perspective issue also applies to stairs, especially if Max is shoot dodging towards them. You may not be able to hurt Max while he's shoot dodging in bullet time, but if you're on stairs, you can waste him as soon as he hits the stairs and bullet time ends. The game also suffered from some noticeable slowdown outside of bullet time whenever there were more than 2 enemies on screen, though in most cases I would be entering bullet time anyway, since enemies can shred through Max's health quickly if you're not careful. Other than that, I don't have anything else to complain about, so let's wrap things up with the opinion. The Game Boy Advance version of Max Payne is incredibly impressive, and the magic employed to pull it off should be studied. It manages to keep the majority of the story in, complete with Max's narration, and changes the gameplay to an isometric shooter, which works surprisingly well for it. Visual depth perception I think will always be one of the drawbacks of an isometric view, and the game does slow down if you're not in bullet time and there's several enemies on screen, but because of how often I use bullet time, this wasn't a particularly huge issue. Despite the parts cut from the game, the story still flowed alright, but there are some unresolved plot points, and I think some of those could have been worked into the game. Nonetheless, this is a version of Max Payne to definitely check out as a technical marvel and as a fun shooter for the Game Boy Advance. So with that, it's time for my rating. I would give Max Payne on the Game Boy Advance a bottle of painkillers out of 10. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the next Infinite Backlog review. If you enjoyed today's review, feel free to check out some of our other videos and subscribe for more. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram and our Facebook page. Once again, thank you for watching.